What is up, my fellow economic gladiators, and welcome back to Boss Economics World. The only channel on the internet that slices through the PR fluff and tells you what's really happening behind the billion-dollar handshakes and cringeworthy photo-ops. Today, folks, we're diving into a story that is just dripping with 21st-century geopolitical irony. The date is October 9, 2025, and the headlines are ablaze. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and India's Narendra Modi are in Mumbai, slapping each other on the back, calling themselves natural partners, and celebrating a brand new free trade pact. Starmer even brought what he called the biggest ever business delegation, 126 companies, to be exact. He says they had to get a bigger plane. A bigger plane, people. In the age of digital everything, the primary metric for economic desperation is now apparently fuselage capacity. What a time to be alive. On the surface, this is the story they want you to hear. Post-Brexit global Britain, spurned by its European exes, finds a hot, new, rapidly growing partner in the East. India, the world's most populous nation and fastest growing major economy, gets a direct line to a G7 market. They're talking tech, defense co-production, critical minerals, and university campuses. Deals are being signed. $1.7 billion in Indian investment is supposedly heading to the UK, creating, and I want you to remember this number, almost 7,000 jobs. Sounds fantastic, right? A win-win. A triumph of modern diplomacy in the face of a big, scary, tariff-wielding America. But you and I, we don't do surface level here. We're not here for the press release, we're here for the autopsy. So, grab your coffee, strap in, and let's dissect the glorious, messy, and profoundly complicated economic reality behind this UK-India love fest. Because this isn't just about a trade deal. This is a story about deglobalization, geopolitical realignment, demographic destiny, and the spectacular contradictions of modern politics. Let's be brutally honest. Why is Keir Starmer on a jumbo jet to Mumbai with 126 of his most anxious-looking CEOs? Is it because of a sudden, profound love for masala chai and Bollywood? No. It's because of the cold, hard, unforgiving math of Brexit. Back in 2016, the Brexiteers sold the British public a vision of global Britain. The idea was that, freed from the shackles of Brussels bureaucracy, the UK would sail the seven seas of commerce, signing bigger, better trade deals with the world's rising powers. India was always the crown jewel in this fantasy. Fast forward to our present, 2025. The reality has been a little less swashbuckling. Let's look at the data that led us here. The UK's own Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, has been consistently forecasting, for years now, that Brexit would ultimately reduce the UK's long-run productivity by 4%. Not a one-off hit, but a permanent haircut on the country's economic potential. We've seen this play out. Between 2016 and 2023, UK trade intensity, that's imports plus exports as a share of GDP, flatlined and then fell, while it rose in every other G7 country. The trade deal with the EU, while better than no deal, introduced a mountain of non-tariff barriers, customs checks, rules of origin, regulatory divergence. The result? By 2023, UK goods exports to the EU were still languishing around 15% below where they would have been without Brexit, according to the Centre for European Reform. So, this trip to India isn't a victory lap. It's a salvage operation. The UK economy has been plagued by anemic growth, projected by the IMF in 2023 and 2024 to be among the worst performing in the G7. Starmer is in Mumbai because he has to be. The UK is a mid-sized economy that willingly detached itself from the world's largest single market next door, and is now desperately trying to plug the multi-billion-pound hole with deals far, far away. Let's put the new India deal in perspective. In 2023, total UK trade with the entire EU bloc was worth around £600 billion. Total UK-India trade was about £36 billion. Now, that number is growing fast, and this deal will certainly boost it. But the idea that it can replace the frictionless, geographically proximate trade with Europe is an economic fantasy. It's like breaking up with your spouse who lives next door and celebrating a new long-distance relationship with someone on another continent. It might be exciting, but you're still going to have to pay for shipping. This isn't a power move by global Britain. This is a survival move. It's a direct consequence of a decade-long national economic strategy that has, to put it mildly, under-delivered. The second layer of this onion is the gigantic elephant in the room, the United States of America. The news report explicitly states this deal is being forged in the face of US tariffs. The US has slapped a 50% punitive tariff on India because Modi's government has refused to stop buying cheap Russian oil, thereby, in Washington's view, financing Putin's war machine. This is the new world order, folks. Welcome to the era of the weaponization of everything. The US dollar, trade policy, and financial sanctions are no longer just tools of economic management, they are the primary instruments of foreign policy. And India is playing a masterclass in what we used to call non-alignment, but is now more like multi-alignment. Let's look at the numbers. Before the Ukraine war in 2022, Russia was a rounding error in India's oil imports. By mid-2023, Russia had become India's single largest supplier, accounting for over 40% of its crude imports, often at a steep discount. Data from firms like Keir showed India importing over 2 million barrels per day from Russia at its peak. For a rapidly industrializing nation of 1.4 billion people, access to cheap energy isn't a preference, it's a strategic necessity. So, you have the US playing global policeman, demanding its allies fall in line. And you have India saying, thanks, but no thanks. Our national interest comes first. Where does this leave the UK? In a very awkward position. As America's traditional poodle, the UK is expected to follow Washington's lead. But Brexit Britain can't afford to. Alienating India, the future engine of global growth, is a luxury it no longer has. So, Starmer does what any pragmatic politician would do: he flies to Mumbai, smiles, talks about shared values, and conspicuously avoids mentioning the whole funding a war thing. This is a profound shift. We are witnessing the fracturing of the post-Cold War consensus. The world is splintering into three major blocks: the US-led bloc, the China-led bloc, and a third, increasingly powerful group of swing states like India, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, who are refusing to pick a side and are instead playing the giants off against each other. The UK-India deal is a textbook example of this new dynamic. It's a minilateral agreement between two significant powers trying to build a partnership that exists outside the direct gravitational pull of either Washington or Beijing. It's a hedge. For India, it's a hedge against over-reliance on China and a way to balance against US pressure. For the UK, it's a desperate hedge against post-Brexit irrelevance. Now we get to the really juicy part. The part where the lofty rhetoric of global free trade crashes headfirst into the grubby reality of domestic politics. On the flight over, Starmer made it clear he would resist demands from business to allow more highly skilled workers from India to come to the UK. He later claimed that visas wasn't part of the FTA. Are you kidding me? Folks, this is the single biggest, most glaring contradiction in this entire affair. Let me explain. The UK is a service-based economy. Over 80% of its GDP comes from services, finance, law, consulting, education, tech. When the UK signs a free trade deal, it's not primarily about selling more Scotch whiskey or Range Rovers. It's about selling its services. And how do you trade services? You trade them through the movement of people. Indian tech giants like Tata Consultancy Services and Infosys are huge employers in the UK. British universities want to attract more Indian students, who pay massive international fees. British banks want to manage the wealth of India's burgeoning middle class. All of this requires people, consultants, engineers, students, bankers, to be able to move between the two countries with relative ease. India knows this. For years, in every trade negotiation with a Western country, India's number one ask has been improved visa access for its skilled professionals. It's the cornerstone of their trade strategy. But Starmer, like the conservative prime ministers before him, is trapped. The entire political project of Brexit was built on a promise to take back control of borders and reduce immigration. Even though the UK has faced crippling labour shortages post-Brexit, with over 1 million job vacancies becoming the norm in 2022 to 2023, particularly in tech and healthcare, the political pressure to keep immigration numbers down is immense. So you have this absurd paradox: the UK desperately needs the economic benefits of a deep relationship with India, but is politically unwilling to pay the price India is asking for. It's like going to a restaurant, ordering the most expensive item on the menu, and then trying to pay with a coupon for a free side salad. When Starmer says none of the business leaders had raised the issue of visas, he's either being disingenuous or the CEOs on his bigger plane are terrible at their jobs. This issue is the elephant in the room, and papering it over with platitudes about new energy won't make it disappear. This will be the single biggest point of friction in the implementation of this deal, and it could ultimately limit its success. Finally, let's look at the actual deals being announced, because they tell a story in themselves. First, the Indian investment in the UK, $1.7 billion and almost 7,000 jobs. Let's be clear, investment is good. But jobs created is one of the most notoriously squishy metrics in politics. Are these new jobs, or existing jobs being re-announced? Are they high-skilled, high-wage jobs, or call center positions? Over what time frame? The UK needs high-productivity jobs to escape its growth funk, and we need to see the fine print before celebrating. Now, the UK investment in India. This is where it gets fascinating. We see Graphcore, a British chip designer, planning a $1.3 billion investment. This isn't just a random investment. This is the UK inserting itself directly into the global semiconductor wars. India has its own ambitious Make in India program and a $10 billion incentive scheme to attract chip manufacturing. By partnering with India, the UK is trying to build resilient supply chains away from China and Taiwan, a strategy every Western nation is scrambling to implement. It's smart, it's strategic, and it's a sign of where the real value in this partnership lies: co-development in high-tech sectors of the future. But then we have the most intriguing, and potentially chilling, detail of all. Starmer met with Nandan Nilekani, the architect of India's Aadhaar system, to get advice on a similar digital ID program for the UK. Folks, this is a massive deal. Aadhaar is the world's largest biometric ID system, linking the fingerprints and iris scans of over 1 billion Indians to a unique 12-digit number. In India, it was revolutionary. It brought hundreds of millions in the informal economy into the formal financial system, allowing for direct benefit transfers and cutting down on corruption. But India and the UK are vastly different countries. Importing an Aadhaar-style system into a developed nation with a long history of civil liberties and privacy concerns is a can of worms of epic proportions. The economic argument is for efficiency and fraud reduction. The reality is that it creates a centralized government database of your most personal biometric information, potentially linked to your taxes, your healthcare, your bank accounts, and your travel. It's the dream of every technocrat and the nightmare of every privacy advocate. The fact that this is on the table shows the direction of travel for modern governance. The line between economic efficiency and state surveillance is getting thinner every single day. So, what's the final verdict from Boss Economics World on this UK-India bromance? This deal is a masterclass in 21st century pragmatism. It is the logical, perhaps inevitable, outcome of major global trends: the relative decline of the old Western powers, the unstoppable rise of Asia, the fragmentation of the global order, and the political contradictions of a post-Brexit Britain. It is simultaneously a sign of British desperation and a potentially brilliant strategic pivot. It's an attempt by two middle powers, both with imperial pasts and uncertain futures, to carve out a space for themselves in a world increasingly dominated by the US-China bipolar contest. But its success is far from guaranteed. It is built on a fundamental, and perhaps fatal, contradiction: the desire for a deep economic partnership in services without a parallel commitment to the movement of the people who provide those services. And it hints at a future where economic integration comes at the cost of personal privacy through pervasive digital surveillance. Is this the dawn of a new Empire 2.0, built on silicon chips and strategic handshakes? Or is it just two leaders on a bigger-than-planned plane, trying to patch the gaping holes in their respective economic ships with a well-timed press release? As always, the truth is likely somewhere in between. The headlines will fade, but the structural forces at play will not. Keep your eye on the visa numbers, not the trade numbers. That's where the real story will be told. That's all the time we have for today, gladiators. Keep your portfolios diversified and your critical thinking sharp. I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.